Anyway, I realize we haven't talked about your debut. So the Second Bell, that wasn't the first book that you wrote, from what you said?
No, so I did write, I mean, I was quite lucky. I only wrote one totally unpublishable novel before The Second Bell. But it was massive. It was like, its first version was like 120,000 word Moloch of, it was a sort of humorous fantasy.
Right.
But with some really horrific themes, a highly unlikable character intentionally, but it was just, it had some good bones, but it's not salvageable because it's just so convoluted. Right. And I can tell, like, even looking at it, it's like there were points where I'm like, I'm missing the plot. I'm missing, like, I have no idea I wrote it except that it sounded good. And it got some like initial agent interest, and I thought like, this is it, you know, this is my ship's come in, you know, I'm going to get an offer any second. And I think, like, I don't know, 7 or 8 agents actually read the whole thing, which I have to ask, why? Why? I'm looking at it now, and it's like I printed it out because I thought, you know what, people liked it. Maybe there's something in it. And I was like, no, there isn't. It's just no. And I was so sure I was going to get an offer because, you know, you get that like initial when you don't know anything, and you get like, you know, full several like full manuscript requests at the same time, and you're like all excited and stuff. And then it's like, no, you know what, we'll pass. And you're just kind of, and it's really deflating. And it takes a moment to kind of, you know, pick up your ego off the ground. And but it was a great learning experience. You know, some of it was that it was just completely under edited.
Right.
I think I didn't know how to edit it. I mean, since then I have read, like, I worked in publishing, right? But like, since then it's completely different experience when you're on the other side of it.
Okay.
It's not the same as working in an editorial department. It's not. So I think there were points where I just didn't know how to edit myself, and I had to learn that.
Right.
And I had to kind of really digest what didn't work for me. And then I started a new novel, and I kind of felt like, okay, you know what, this is completely different tone. This is not funny. This is serious stuff. I'm enjoying this. And I just went with it. And it was, that's not to say I might never write a funny book again, because I enjoy those too. But it's, you kind of need to get some mistakes out of the way before you can go into it and actually feel good about what you've created. So
I think so, yeah. If I look back, I haven't dared look back at some of my trunk novels because I think I'm going to be horrified. You know, at the time you're so sure, like you say, oh, this is brilliant, this is working, this is great. And if I look back now, I'm probably thinking, why? What were you thinking? They're just, you know, I don't want to go back.
I think, you know, it's the hardest thing is when you have those, you know, even scenes or whole chapters of something that sounds really good or sounds really exciting, and you're like, well, this is just the funniest joke, or this is just such a wonderful character. And so, and then when you're a little bit more mature and more experienced, you're like, but yes, actually there is something to this character. It just doesn't fit in this book. This is like a vignette from a completely different story. Why'd you do that? And having that kind of distance is, it's really important, isn't it? Because otherwise you'll just, unless you can step back and judge yourself harshly, which is, you know, people will judge you harshly, as we all know from Goodreads.
Don't read your reviews. Never read your reviews.
I went once.
Right, okay,
once,
just once.
And my agent was like, we had a deal. We had a deal. You were not supposed to. But I was in that. I was in that kind of fluffy marshmallow place, you know, where you kind of just come off getting some really good blurbs and getting a couple good reviews, and all the kind of people you've been chatting with are publishing people. So you're kind of like, oh, you know, like, but people who review books, right? They like books. They like books, and, you know, they're my sort of people, because, you know, they're nice people. They're never be mean kind of people. And when you go in there and you're like, why would you say that? I mean,
yeah. I rush into Goodreads, post my books, and then rush out again. I mostly use it to keep track of what I've been reading, just for my own benefit. But I rush in, post, and then I go away again, just so I don't, because I can't.
No. I mean, now I don't go over, because it's just not worth it. But you know, I was talking with my friends. There's a lot of reviews which are kind of, obviously, you know, people, I'm sure, you know, people can make very good points when they don't like something. I'm not saying, but sometimes you get like, I saw one star review which was just like, oh, really well written, good characters, interesting plot. But I realized halfway through that this is a kind of book that I don't like. 1 star. I'm like, what? Because it's like, it started off good.
The best Amazon one I ever saw was 1 star. The book turned up, it was scuffed, and the cover was bent, and this was a gift from my husband. 1 star. I'm like, so are you reviewing the delivery driver, or Amazon, or the book? Because at the moment you posted it on my book and you've said that it's 1 star because it arrived bent. How is, I was like, yeah, this is why I can't read any reviews. That's just not.
Or it's like the best ones are reviews for books that haven't come out yet.
Yeah.
That was just, and they're like 1 star reviews, you know.
People are desperate to hate.
Not
something.
even a 5, not even an encouraging 5. It's like, you know, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm sure it's going to be crap.
You can't do it. You can't read reviews. They're just, it's not.
No.
Anyway.
Dan Hanks, you know, the author of
Phlebotomist?
Captain Moxley. The phlebotomist is Chris Pantier. So Dan Hanks gave me the best advice actually when it comes to reviews, which is that, like, if people have something nice to say to you, they will tag you. And it's so true. But
they also, people tag on bad reviews sometimes on Twitter. I've seen people tag and say, you know, really awful, and then they link you to it. You're like, why would you want me to go and look at that if you didn't like it?
Oh, that is bad form.
I've seen people do it on Twitter, and I go, I'm not going to look at it because what? Oh. Yeah, so there
1
again,
star. I haven't, like, this hasn't happened to me yet, so, you know, I'm still.
I'm warning you now. Then I'm giving you a warning.
I'm clearly still on the rosy hills of a gullible.
You're still marshmallows.
Yes.
And it's still all lovely.
Marshmallows and unicorns. But I have to ready myself for that kind of.
You're going to turn around.
Evil coming my way.
That giant chicken is going to be there pecking at you. Any second, he's going to come for you. You know, this is what it's about.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, you know, but you see sometimes people reviewing things and it's like, okay, so you if you look at the profile of a person, they have reviewed like 100 books last year, and their average star rating is 2 stars. And you just think, okay, well, maybe you just don't like reading.
Yeah, maybe you just don't like the genre. Go read a different genre.
Maybe. I mean, you're clearly not enjoying something here.
So. You just keep coming back and pushing the buzzer and giving an electric shock, but you just keep doing it. It's like, maybe this isn't, go and read some romance, go and read some adventure books, go and, you know, maybe just not fantasy. You don't have to read it if you're not enjoying it.
I don't know. I mean,
people are weird.
The thing is, it's like, it's not even a helpful review, is it? Like,
have you been kicked in the teeth yet by Kirkus? They are renowned.
No, I haven't.
So there's the trilogy. There's the library journal.
Kirkus is the one you pay for, isn't it?
No. So there's Library Journal, Publishers Weekly, and Kirkus. I think those are the kind of the 3 big places to get reviews. And Kirkus,
Publishers Weekly liked me.
Oh, good. There you go. Kirkus are renowned for giving people really brutal reviews. The worst thing is they never put a name to any of their reviews. So it doesn't say like John Smith or Mary Jones. It's always just, this is the worst thing I've ever read. Trifle, boring, ordinary, very, very mediocre, not worth your time.
Pedestrian, simply pedestrian.
Yeah, it's just like, wow, wow. It's rare that they like anything. So I'm waiting for my Kirkus review to get a kick in the teeth of the new book. But I'm braced for it this time, so it's not going to bother me.
I mean, I have to say that when I'm looking for books to read, I'm almost never swayed by the like negative reviews, unless they're actually unless they're consistently bad. So if a star, if a book has like a 1-star rating and you see the reviews that actually seem a bit more thoughtful and they're like, look, I wanted to like it, these are the problems, then you're like, okay, I have a million other things I could read. But generally, I don't even look at the reviews, to be honest, because I just sort of you get the gist of what the book is like from the just partially from the descriptions, and also you sort of see the hot books of that year, the things that are coming out, and it's just, and like this is like, if this is set out to be the bestseller this year, and like everybody is kind of like so excited for it, it might be worth reading, because professionals would not put that kind of money behind something that they didn't believe in themselves. I don't know. I mean, maybe I just like to look at the positive ones, like if people are really excited for something, that's more likely to get me interested than people being negative about something is likely to dissuade me.
Yeah, there are certain tastemakers that I trust, that if they say, I really enjoyed this, and I think I've got similar tastes to them, and I've heard them talk about it, friends or other writers, I think, oh yeah, that sounds like my kind of book, and they've steered me right in the past, I will pick up a book. I mean,
that's even more sort of intellectual than I do it. I just kind of go, oh, well, these people like posted all hearts and stuff around this book, and we just love it, and we're just so happy about it. I'm like, I like this happiness. I want some of this happiness. Give it to me.
Yeah, sometimes you want an uplifting, fun book, and you think, right, okay. And sometimes I don't want to think. I just want something. It's like films. Sometimes I want to be challenged. Sometimes I just want to watch things blow up. And so I just put the telly on and it's moving wallpaper, and I watch a film and I just sit back and think, But, sometimes you read a book and you want to laugh. And sometimes you don't. But anyway, we haven't talked about the second bell yet. We're talking. So tell me, and because I know, but tell the people about the second bell. What is it about?
So the second bell is a Slavic folklore inspired fantasy about a Striga and her mother. And it's basically, there's a small community in the mountains. It's quite isolated, and sometimes a child is born there with 2 hearts, and such a child is considered to be a Striga, an abomination, a monster with blasphemous powers, and naturally something that has to be expelled from the town. And because such children have mothers, sometimes a mother decides to leave on a voluntary banishment in order to bring up her child. And the second bell is about one such mother, Myriad, who leaves her town and everybody she knows and her whole family and neighbors, and decides to join the Striga community very high up in the mountains with her child. And the Striga community, and the story follows her and her daughter 19 years later. Mm-hmm. So the Striga community, because we're essentially the same people as the humans down below, they really believe that their nature is evil. And if they give in to their nature, then horrific consequences are going to come their way. And they police each other in very strict ways, and additionally, because so if a Striga tries to nurture that other heart that they have, this Striga heart, there's a very permanent and instantaneous change happening to their shadow. So the shadows sort of can start moving in a way that is not entirely natural, and that betrays them to the rest of the community. So any transgression is instantly visible and instantly punished. So the Shigas and the humans don't really know. So that's the point. So we don't really know what the powers of Shigas are, but they know they're different, and over generations, it's been built up as this huge taboo that you're not even supposed to explore it. You're not supposed to ask the questions. You're supposed to accept this is evil, and you're supposed to keep that part of your nature hidden. And
that was the thing that really interested me, that it's the fact that they view themselves as evil because they've, as you said, they're essentially the same people until they leave, and they've been told that it's evil. And so you're exploring the nature of evil with these people self-policing themselves so that they don't actually find out what could happen if this thing, it could be something wonderful, it could be something terrible, as they've always been told, but they don't know. And even when they're not living with the humans, the other humans, they're still self-policing themselves, which sounds quite unpleasant. The fact that they're constantly watching each other. It's like, are you a communist sort of thing? You're constantly watching people and sort of saying, oh, your shadow might be moving peculiar. You're looking at exploring your nature.
I think it's very kind of, I think it would be more of a human reaction, like, than just thinking like, you know what, they threw me, they discarded me like so much rubbish, I'm going to go against what they said. Because, all the mothers that left with that chose to leave with their children, they themselves are not certain that whether their children are evil or not. Just because Myriad made the choice that she couldn't abandon her child, it would be quite a leap to going from I can't abandon my newborn baby to I am sure that everything I've been told up till this point is false.
Yeah.
Right. So that uncertainty is a part of them, and it's you go in, and if you can control that urge, then that means that you can push away the necessity to confront whether or not your core belief is wrong. Right? It's because you can surely just not do it. Right? So and I think those taboos can get really stronger and stronger over time, because as from generation to generation, if your grandmother was a Shiga and she didn't, she didn't feel the need to sort of explore her other nature, who are you to question whether it's okay or not? You kind of. And when you grow up in the society that like watches you very carefully, and I think it's so the Shiga, society is quite fundamentalist in the way that many societies are, sort of all over the world, and it can be religious fundamentalism, it can be cultural fundamentalism, but anybody who steps outside of what's perceived to be the one true path gets instantly sort of shut down, and that and that just perpetuates it. So I was quite interested in how that would sort of play out in that kind of society that's quite secluded, that they don't have any really experience of the sort of wider world.
Yeah.
So so I just wanted to explore that and see how different kinds of people would react.
It definitely has lots of parallels to other things, as you said, cultural things, and the idea of being an outsider, whatever it might be. And because initially with the fact that, to have two hearts, it's not physically visible immediately. And a lot of people carry many secrets of their own, even, 21st century, that are still seen as taboo by certain societies around the world and perfectly normal in other societies. So there's a lot of parallels I can see between the second bell and other things that even in this country we're still struggling with in 2021, that people are just intolerant of.
I don't think we're super advanced in that respect, because part of the I think it's part of human nature to sort of find ways to delineate what is right and wrong. And I think that's, in many ways, I'm guilty of it as well, in terms of not understanding that process sometimes in their everyday life, where people like me, where just didn't understand, like, why did people vote for Brexit? Right? I mean, I didn't understand, because like, surely you see, this will make you poorer, this will make you less important, this will take away your rights. Like, why would you do this? It's such a regressive step. But when you try and kind of step away from the very kind of toxic conversation about like, oh, they do it because they're bad, they're racists, they're stupid people, the thing is, it's just, and it's a very emotional thing. So, it's especially, I'm an immigrant, right? I'm one of the undesirables, according to those people. So, so it's quite hard to separate yourself emotionally from the discourse. But when you do, and when you step back from it, you kind of realize, if you live in sort of, like in the counties, in a small village, the leafy small village, and everything used to be like nice and simple, and your life is nice and simple, and you know what you're going to do day to day, and you just enjoy it, and you enjoy going to your mass and on to the church service on Sunday, and then you have the roast, and then you do this and that, and then you suddenly have all those people coming in who do things very differently to you, and everything that you see as a normal thing suddenly becomes, and like maybe your favorite Sunday roast pub is now an Indian restaurant, and you don't understand it because you never this is not the kind of food you eat on a Sunday, right? So, and you don't like those changes because they're very sudden, and people can come in with different set of ideas about what isn't acceptable, about how, and it might go both ways, right? It might be that you have an influx of people who are sort of too liberal for you, and they just, and you feel like, oh, but like, I like my little conservative life, and you're coming in and behaving in a way that I was taught isn't acceptable. And because I shrink back from that, you consider me a bigot, and nobody likes being considered a bigot. So they just entrench, right? And because of this lack of dialogue, and because for years, essentially people like me, like who are like the liberals, were just like, well, you don't like the way the world is changing? Tough, this is the way it's going to be, you have to be open. What, you don't like this, the way that people like have behave in the street, like during gay parade? Well, just, hide in your little hole, grandpa, kind of, so it's like, and this attitude has created a whole section of society which might not say outright that they don't like something because they don't want to be called names, but no possibility of dialogue has been created.
No.
And it means that if someone, like someone with no scruples, like, Boris Johnson, like people who don't believe in anything except that they should be in power, they come along and they're like, look at this discontent. You see, nobody's talking to these people. Nobody's telling them that their values are important. Nobody's telling them that they're valid. Nobody tells them that it's okay to want your hometown to be the way it was when you were growing up. Let's tell them that. And then you suddenly have like millions of people coming out of the woodwork who you didn't even know were there, and they were not happy because they were given a purpose. They were given a purpose of showing like, look, it's okay to want to be the way you want to be.
We and more barriers between us.
And I think it's and I think this is the way it kind of works in around the world. You see it now, like you see this, you know, the lack of conversation is, unfortunately, it's a very, whichever group's sort of winning at a particular point, or feels like they're winning at a particular point, they just completely discount the rest. And that's why we sort of swing from an extreme to an extreme in a way that always alienates somebody. And I just find it quite interesting in because obviously when you're writing it, you're in control of a narrative, and you can explore it in sort of more gradual way, and you can look at different points of view within the book, and you can kind of think about, okay, well, this kind of person, how would they feel about it? It's like what we were talking about earlier, like where you don't want to be didactic. You don't want to say, well, it's, of course it's wrong that they think that shigas are bad. You know, you have, like, it's natural for them to think that a child that's born with two hearts and a shadow that moves in really weird ways, that there's something wrong with this child. You know, as a reader, you don't think that they're right, of course, but in that kind of setup, in a kind of pre-industrial town in the middle of nowhere, you would feel uneasy. And I think and what you do with unease is what drives you. So yeah.
Was it hard for you to remain a little bit apart so that you could write it more impartially and see both sides of it, or were you basically just exploring it as you went through the book and finding reasons for both sides of the argument? I mean, how did you?
I wasn't really, because, you know, I was writing a story, so I wasn't trying to write an argument for either side. It wasn't, you know, it's not a manifesto for anybody, right? It's a story, and you know, if I wanted to write it as almost like a manifesto of some kind, then it would not be a very good story, because you have a pre-assumed sort of set of sort of suppositions that you're trying to force onto the characters. So you're kind of thinking, you know, okay, so this character has that's her agenda, right? This is what is important to her, but this is her these are her surroundings, this is her situation. What's the most likely way for her to react? And, you know, and of course people will sometimes react in a way that feels to the people around them like it's out of character or something, but then when you look deeply, you realize, oh, well, they change the way they behave because something more important to them cropped up in opposition to their previous ideas, and they had to choose. And when they had to choose, they decided whatever sort of is higher up on the totem pole for them. So so I was kind of, you know, when you write different characters with different sort of sets of agendas, and those characters clash in different ways, that allows you to explore things without the emotions that you attach to the things that are actually happening around in your world. So because of course when you're in a world where you are on a side of something, it's very hard to kind of take a step back and really, I mean, it's been how many years since the referendum? I'm just now being all zen about it, you know. I'm starting to be all zen about it, you know. But
7-8 years on.
Yes, so so because it is really hard, isn't it? Because it's when your values clash against someone else's values in a way that feels threatening, it's very hard to divorce yourself from that.
Yeah. It's another reason you shouldn't read reviews, because people will sometimes assume you have the same views as one or more of your characters. So, I've seen that before. The people have said, that's not the author, that's a character, and it's a fictional world, and that's not
Yeah, that's crazy to me. That's crazy to me.
another reason not to read reviews.
I don't know. It's just, I find it so funny sometimes. Well, funny in a way that is kind of funny in a way that's devoid of humor when you look at it deeply.
Very black humor.
Yes, black humor. When people who just are very desperate to kind of find something to feel outraged about, and they pick on a book and they say, oh, this is problematic. And they might not say any more than that, because this word seems to be the key to everything. Like, this is problematic. But it's like they will say, this is problematic because this character has expressed views which are incompatible with my worldviews.
Yes.
And you feel like, well, this is a character in a book. This is a work of art. Eliciting strong emotions is what art is supposed to do. Right? But because there is this sort of, we have this culture where we kind of like to be outraged about things, and sometimes we just read the outrage tweet, but we don't actually look to the source material at all. It can become scary for people to actually, oh no, if I paint this picture, will someone think that I feel a certain way about something that I might have no opinion on whatsoever? But it's Kazuo Ishiguro was saying something about it, actually, and I felt like, but people will self-police, and you really don't want that to happen in the art, because art is supposed to elicit strong emotions, and it is supposed to create a conversation, right? You're not supposed to love every single character in a book. You're not supposed to agree with every character in a book, or any. You don't have to. When did agreement become the benchmark for judging the quality of, artwork?
People they'll self-censor out of fear of cancel culture, out of being labeled as problematic. The book is problematic, and I hate to say it, but I think social media is definitely a contributing factor in the fact that you can't have a discussion. There's no place to have differing opinions and say, okay, I think it's this, but you think it's that. Fair enough, we agree to disagree. There's none of that. It's agree or you're wrong with whatever is currently on the up at the moment. And then a few years later, it might be the other way. And then it's agree or you're wrong. Social media is just not the place to have these conversations, I don't think.
No, I mean, it's just not particularly useful. I mean, it's useful for sharing experiences, right? So it's completely different when people say, this is happening, and this makes me feel in a certain way, and this is what people might not understand about my experience, and that's very interesting. It's less interesting when people think that a work of fiction represents someone's actual, like the author's actual point of view, and that they can stand in judgment of it. Because it's something I feel quite strongly about, because I feel like my side at the moment in the world sort of political stage, I feel like my side is losing, and it doesn't feel great. And the reason it doesn't feel great is because we fight over semantics instead of being angry about actual problems.
Yeah.
And the other side doesn't have this problem, right? Because they're we were great, let's make us great again crowd. They're Britain doesn't need anybody, not even its own sort of other nations like Scotland and Wales, apparently. They know who they are, and they have people in power telling them that what they are is great, and that they don't need to change a thing. Whereas people on our side are constantly telling each other, check yourself, be ashamed, rather than having a conversation. And I think that when you don't have those conversations, that's when problems start, because that's when you have people feeling like, oh, maybe I don't belong to this group anymore because I vary in a tiny way on this one issue, right? And nobody told me why I'm wrong, but they just said that I'm evil because I disagree.
I disagree.
I disagree on how taxation policies should be implemented. And that's something, unless we can talk to people without dehumanizing them, like this is what happens, right? You get people who just want things the way they were, and then you have people who can't agree on how they want things to be. So who's going to win?
I don't know, but I think good books generate interesting conversations within groups of friends and strangers. And I think those kind of conversations, excuse me, between people online are worth having. If a book generates strong emotions, strong feelings, and there are uncomfortable conversations to be had, then I think those are kind of books that are worth writing and worth reading, I think.
Absolutely. I think, and it's funny because, these are things that I'm obviously kind of really thinking about, and these are things that sort of come across in the stuff I write. But these are not the things I set out to write necessarily, I set out thinking, I have an idea, and I have an idea for a character and a setting, and I want to kind of explore some questions like, oh, what would this person do in this kind of situation? And then you start off, and because in the end, like, books are, also supposed to entertainment.
Yes.
Is their primary function, however artsy the style of a book, or however you sort of feel about the importance of a work, if it's not entertaining, then it will not go anywhere. Then you might as well write a manifesto.
Yeah.
No one will read it anyway.
No, just put it up online for free. So
yeah, exactly. So, but it is really, and it's interesting, actually, a lot of those topics really come out when, I'm talking to people like you or people on podcasts. And you sort of, through conversation, you think like, oh, well, but this is an important element of it. This is why this is a part of, what I wanted to look at, even if I didn't sort of have it clarified at the time, but this was what I wanted to look at. Like, themes is something that appears after the book's finished, I think.
Most of the time, yeah. Sometimes I set out with a theme as well as the story, but most of the time I don't. I know only afterwards, through editing and having other people read it, that they tell me what there's the story and then what the book is actually about. And I don't always know what the book is about until I've finished it. And then people point it out to me and I go, oh, of course, that's what it was about.
Of course,
all along, that's what I was planning.
I mean,
yes.
As I was getting some, I had a couple of podcasts with some, very clever people who were asking me very clever questions about, how I sort of centered around the concept of a community versus individual sort of path. And I'm like, well, yes, it is about that. I didn't realize it was about that, but but I can talk about it.
Sure. Yes.
I wanted to ask you, when you were writing The Coward, which is so in such a lovely way, sort of product placed right behind you. Very subtle. I like it.
I know.
I wanted to know, like, so the main character is someone who sort of spends a good portion of their life pretending to be a hero when they know deep down they're a coward. And what prompted you to kind of go with that? Was that the starting point when you were thinking about that particular book, or did you start from a different?
So on previous books, I've had a rough idea of the theme and a vague idea for the story, and I build on that. With this, it was the theme first and foremost. I kind of, so here's something I realized, and it didn't follow through in the books because it came with duology. But if you think about in folklore and other things, the 3 stages of woman, they talk about maiden, mother, and crone. There's different, different terms, but there's always the 3
archetypes. Yeah.
I can't think of the equivalent for men. I could never think of anything. You could say boy, man, and old geezer or something, but it doesn't work. It doesn't have the same flow. It doesn't have the same kind of themes that go back to folklores and stories and all the kind of myths and legends that I grew up reading, and mythology. And I kept thinking about this and thinking about this. And so originally I wrote it as a trilogy exploring the 3 ages of a man. And then it developed and changed. But the core idea was that all of the fantasy that I read, like you, when I was very young, was quite similar. And it was all about heroes going off and doing great things. And I started thinking about, yeah, but what does that do to a person? I'd been reading a lot of books and watching a lot of stuff about soldiers coming back from war, reporters coming back from war in the Balkans after 10 years and the effects it had on them. I stayed with someone, a reporter who'd done that. And it just sort of all kind of filtered into my brain. I developed this story about this guy did this as a kid. He was 17. He went along with the heroes, had a great adventure. He thought it was brilliant. I'll become a hero. I'll become rich and famous. There's stuff in there about fame as well. He does it. He comes back and everybody dies apart from him. And it's like, okay, so what would that happen? What would that impact would that be on a person, on their mentality, on their life, how society views them, how he views himself, how he has to protect his legacy and their legacy because they're all dead. And no one wants to hear the truth. No one wants to hear the brutal versions of reality. We all
it's like, well, it's very much World War I, isn't it? Where you could have like a whole town go off and just one person would come back.
Yeah. So this was the starting point of the story, and then I kind of developed it and fed into it, and other things grew out of that. But that was where it all kind of came from. And
that's so interesting. It's like I never thought about it this way, I guess, but there is this sense of kind of there's a survivor bias, right?
Yep.
So we only hear the stories from the people who didn't get stabbed to death,
yes,
a mile from home. But it's interesting, I was when you were talking about like sort of male archetypes. I remember, I think I wrote my undergraduate dissertation on something quite similar, actually.
Okay.
When I was writing on Jack London's fiction, and he was this kind of manly man who had there's a sense that, like, I think for a very long time, women did have that sense that the way their sort of gender stereotype is created is a construct that, like, oh, women want to wear dresses and are delicate and kind of maternal and all that. Like, there is that sense that, like, there is something quite artificial about it. Whereas even now, I think maybe it's changing now gradually, but for a majority of men, I think there's this sense that there is some kind of benchmark of true manhood, right, that they have to aspire to. And of course, that sense that this is something innate and almost like biological, that's quite toxic, because it means that anybody who doesn't fall into that feels excluded and feels like they don't match up.
Yep.
But what I wanted to sort of explore when I was writing it is this sense that there are different models of this true masculinity. And sometimes even you can have one person, one writer like Jack London, who throughout his life thought that there's only one true way to be a man, but it changed drastically depending on his personal circumstances. So when he was very, very young, just to give you like a quick example, so when he was very, very young, and he was very athletic, and he was liked to box, and he was, there's those photos of him, like he did photo shoots with his friends, in like his his tighty whities, and
big muscles
hanging out with the sailors, hanging out with going off to go for gold rush, kind of. Didn't find gold, but came back with books full of ideas for novels and stories. So he was a great fan of Nietzsche then, and he felt like a true man is like a superman. It's like this physical paragon of of strength and health, and someone who is just really energetic and goes off on adventures. And then his health started to slowly decline, and then slightly faster decline. And then he had this he wrote these books where he was just like, a true man is like a political leader, right? A true man is someone who can really, lead from the barricades and change the course of a nation through the strength of his intellect and his, and the strength of his ideas and, his integrity or whatever. And then he had this idea about, he actually quite liked being a farmer.
Right.
And he felt like, what, a true man is a man who nurtures the land.
Very different, three very different perspectives.
Yes, but it's almost like it felt like, when you're reading his book, it feels like he forgot.
Right.
But
wow.
Like, you used to say this. It's just like, oh,
that wasn't me. It's like,
that was a young man's sort of, and there's at no point is there sort of a moment of introspection when you read his novels where you have a character who thinks like, well, I used to think that it was all about being super fit, but now I realize that I'm more interested in this, because it would take away from that sense that this is innate masculinity. This is the characteristic of a true man.
Yeah.
And I find it really interesting, and I think maybe that's why there's no similar archetypes for men, because in those stories, a man is the hero, right?
Yep.
So however you see the concept of a hero, that's what he is. And you can only have the other men are those who don't rise up to this standard.
Yes.
So it's sort of simplified, right?
Yeah. So it is a very rich area that I just started. I've dipped my toe into the water of it to explore it for this one, but
that sounds really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to this book, actually. Not least because of the gorgeous cover. It's really pretty. I'm very shallow that way.
So tell me, what are you working on next? What's the plan after the second bell?
So there is something in the works I can't talk about just yet.
Okay.
That's sort of on the kids' side.
Right.
And currently I'm actually preparing, a couple pitches for sort of adult books. I have 3 novels completed after the second bell.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They're for slightly different markets, and there's something that I would quite like to write in a sort of style of, well, maybe not the style of the second bell, but kind of closer to that audience.
Yeah.
So I have an idea I'm working on right now, and I just started writing it. So
you're going to talk it over with your agent, and then.
Well, I've talked it over John's very excited about it. So it's more it's more of the powers that be must decree that they want something else from me, and the best way to do it, people watching, please buy my book, because that will make it so much more likely that I'll be able to write the next one. But it's I joke, but not really.
Not really.
Really. So it's all sort of trying to see how this goes before we can discuss the next project.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I wish I had more to say about it.
No, you got to keep it secret. You can't spoil things. Readers want to be surprised, and they want to be entertained, as you said. It's one of the key things. It's entertainment.
So are you almost finished with volume 2 of the Coward now?
It's done.
It's done.
Yeah, the second one of 2 of the duology is done. And the book after that, which is totally brand new, that's done. I'm ahead. I used lockdown productively, so.
Very, very, very good. I used the first lockdown productively. The subsequent ones sort of varied in things, but then I was working quite a lot on the kind of promotional side of things.
Well, it's fair enough. So the second bell is out now. We want people to go out and buy it and read it, so you can write more books. That's the plan. Well, thank you for coming on and talking to me tonight about everything. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you. I had a great time, as is evidenced by how long we've been recording for.
Goodbye, everyone.